success. So for those of you who are new to the PYP page or our YouTube channel, I'm Jenn Grace. I am the founder and CEO of Publish Your Purpose Press. And today is a very special live with Q&A with the authors. And I think this might be the first time that we have a book that we've published that has two authors of it, which is kind of cool. So I am with Anna Huff. So yep, there's Anna, and Teresa Reyes Castillo. Did I pronounce your name right? Because I actually don't think I've ever said it out loud. Yeah? Yes. I should know this. We've been working together since like February.
Right. You should definitely know this.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I always say your first name. Okay, so I have posted in the description of today's video just a short little blurb from the back of your book. But I would love to start with just you sharing, and I will hold up the visual as you are talking, just a little bit of who you both are individually, what the book is about, and then I'll get into some more in-depth questions.
It looks beautiful.
It does look beautiful. Who's going to start? Anna.
This together.
Right. We should.
But I'll start it.
Yeah.
We often go together, so it's kind of hard to separate. So my name's Anna Huff. I'm a psychologist with my wife, who's also a psychologist. We met in graduate school not too long ago. 7 years ago? 8 years? 6 years.
Which I know because I read the book.
Right. 6 years ago. I'm not good at the math. It feels like it's been forever in a very good way. Mm-hmm. Our book is a telling of our story together, and it's written in such a way that it allows other people to go on a similar journey and a similar path. So when we met, we were in the middle of a graduate school program that was intense and grueling and awful at times and wonderful at other times, and during that time we went through a spiritual awakening individually and then together, which was really an astounding and magical process to go through. But our book is written about that journey that we took, but in a way that portrays the inner pieces, not the outer pieces. It doesn't tell you what was going on in the world. It tells you all the inner process. And the purpose of that is so that people can use it to go on their own journeys. We often look outside of us to try to figure out how to do that, or for some roadmap or some guidance, and there's not a lot out there. It helps people understand what that process is. It's very valuable.
So really the book is a memoir about our relationship. So it takes just the moment in time that we met and kind of develops our relationship through the chapters.
And you know what I love about your book, and of course I'm always biased with the books that we publish and the authors that we work with, but what I really love is the way that it's first person and it's just going back and forth between you both, and how you have, so on the cover for those looking, you each have your own little animal symbol, and as you go throughout, I just love how it's in one of your voices, and then it's, you know, it appears, so you're like, okay, that's, you know, that's who's talking. So this is a complete kind of random question, but why the animals that you chose on the cover?
Ooh, okay. So we made it so that it looked like yin and yang for Anna's and mine. So it's like opposite. And mine is supposed to be a Black Panther, but the whole idea was to make it white so that hers could be black, because we both picked black animals. So mine is a Black Panther because I had this meditation and I met a Black Panther and it ran into me. So it was like a part of me, and I feel like it really portrays me as like a voice and a reader and a storyteller in the book.
I love it. That's awesome. Just I've got deeper questions and I've got very random questions that are going to come up as we go through. So for those who are watching live, if you have a question and you want to ask the authors, you're more than welcome to. Just I'm trying to look at my phone for the comments and talk at the same time. So give me a minute for a delay if you do have a question. So we're going to be here for, I would say, a good maybe half hour, so no more than an hour, just having this conversation with Teresa and Anna to just really talk about the book itself, but more so the process. So I would love to hear, because you are co-authors of a book, and I think that oftentimes people have enough problems trying to write a book when it's just them writing it, let alone trying to do it at the same time and having very distinctive voices. So can you just share a little bit about kind of the creative process that the two of you went through to collaborate and make this happen without any major issues potentially?
Okay, so Teresa gets full credit. She came up with all of the chapter titles.
Oh, yes. I was like, wait, what?
So it was fascinating how it started. So we knew since we met that we would write this book, but the story hadn't been lived out yet. And so we hit this moment when we were in Connecticut in February where we walked into this store called the Angel Cooperative, and we met with this woman who said, I'm really getting that you have to write a book, that none of this is going to work where you're trying to head in your life, what you're trying to do, it's not going to work until you get this book written. And so we went home, and that night Teresa started writing, and it just cascaded from there. So that weekend, she wrote the chapter titles, and we both know our story because we lived it together. And we had a general idea of what the chapter titles represented. Yeah. And then that first weekend, so it was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and there was like a giant snowstorm, and so no one went anywhere. Everyone was stuck inside, and the whole first weekend we did nothing but write, and we didn't often talk, and it was fascinating to go through. So we would write a chapter, and then we would sit and we'd talk, and we'd read each other's chapters, and then we'd go again and we'd write the second one. But we didn't have these moments of, hey, write about this, or hey, you should put this in there, or hey, I'm doing this. Somehow it all just lined up. Like we would talk to each other about, what did you put in chapter 2? I put this. Oh my gosh, so did I. And then we would keep going.
Well, so because we had milestones. So we wrote about the moments that were really crucial that were the same moments. Yeah, but from our own perspectives.
And so how did you decide where to end? I know to some degree it was timing, because you met this person who said, like, you need to basically birth this book, then you get trapped by a snowstorm. But how did you know, like, where the logical point of ending at least this book was?
It just naturally happened where we were kind of phasing out of Ridgefield, which is where we established our practice originally, and we were heading into a transition of moving and starting our private practice somewhere else in Fairfield. And that point was like an ending of kind of like a perfect ending for the book, because we were starting something new.
Do you think that you will write additional memoirs? Because, there are serial memoirists, where people who are writing about certain periods of time and different angles and such. Do you suspect that you'll have more?
Yes. So we spoke with this woman who we care about very deeply. She's an acupuncturist. She's very, very spiritual. She's kind of like a shaman, I would say, but she doesn't call herself that. And she read the book, and she talked about how it was amazing that we were outlining for people the stages of going through a spiritual awakening. And it was fascinating because she talked to us about this back in like March. And she was like, here's what's going to happen. You're going to keep going through more stages. It doesn't just stop with this, it keeps going. She was like, it's really important that you document that for people so that people can have access to what's happening. So yeah, there will be more. We're currently living out story 2.
Yeah, there will definitely be many more, actually.
That was my suspicion. So for people who are looking for a good read, or they're a memoir fan, which I happen to be a huge memoir fan, then it's kind of, building that relationship with you as the authors to the readers, and knowing that, hey, more information is coming. Like, this is just one, like, granted, it is a almost 300-page book, or just over 200 pages. That's just a snapshot in time. Like, it really is just a small glimpse of the overall picture of who you all are. So tell me more about your impact and what your, when you've already kind of alluded to this a little bit, but the impact that you want your book to make in this world. What does that look like?
Well, I think our original intent was to have people kind of live through our journey and then wonder about their own. So starting their own journey as inspired by this book. Mm-hmm. So take them through the motions of ours, which was often not pretty, often difficult, and see us kind of go through a rebirth, because that's kind of what happens with an awakening. If you can kind of withstand the parts that are really hard, to go through a rebirth and kind of become a new person. Mm-hmm. And experience that through our relationship.
Yeah, given this is a memoir, it's not always pretty, and people's lives aren't always pretty. That's a normal thing. Everyone has pretty times and not pretty times. Yeah, and I think that's extremely helpful for people to see and to read about and to be able to experience.
So tell me more about the difficulties, because as you said, a memoir, like a real good memoir, has like all the stuff. It's the good, it's the bad, it's the ugly. I feel like you've accomplished like really telling your story in an authentic and a raw and real way. But what about the difficulties in this process of actually getting your book published? Like, where were those challenging points for you where maybe you questioned yourself or second guessed your judgment, or am saying, why did we decide to do this? Like, where did you find the challenging parts to be?
So this is a perfect time to pull this in and give whatever higher power people believe in some credit, because this book for us was channeled in. This was something we knew we had been called to do. So whether that's the universe or God or source or spirit, a lot of our strength in writing this came from there. There were a lot of stumbling blocks, particularly when we were in the process of writing. We wrote this in a month, and it was exhausting how it just, it flowed out, and people think, oh my gosh, that's amazing. But it's also really exhausting, spending that much time at a computer just like typing away. And during that month in particular, our appointments were being canceled, not by us, by other people. Mm-hmm. We had a time when we tried to leave and go somewhere, and our car broke down, and all we had was our laptop. So it was like,
guess we'll write.
Right, I guess we're gonna write. So it was like we had a month where it was almost like our lives outside of that were being put on hold, and there were times when that was hard to accept.
Mm-hmm. I think it was what was so difficult about the writing part is because we relived it in a sense. So the good bits were awesome. Like the real beginning, oh, this is great, and we're gonna say this, and part of it we wrote in silence, so we had our laptops and were across from each other on separate couches in the living room, and it was great, and it was light, and it was beautiful. And then we got to the not so good bits, and it was dark, and it was hard, and I was like, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I'm writing this, and I don't even know what I'm writing. That was hard.
So how did you get through that? You're both psychologists, and I feel like it's evident that you are both psychologists in the way that you were able to analyze yourselves, like within the book specifically, but also having worked with you guys for the last 6-8 months. Like, it's very clear how self-aware you are. So I would love if you have any insights for other people who are in your position, who are about to embark on writing their memoir and writing their story, and they're in the nasty parts where it's painful to rehash. And Teresa, like you were just saying, like you're getting all enraged basically because you're just pissy because you have to relive this to like actually get the emotion out. You know, how did you each individually handle it, and what would your advice be to somebody who might be in a similar place right now?
I mean, for us, I think it was recognizing that we were experiencing what we were writing, and that is what was intended for the book. And the idea was to allow people to experience what we experienced. And because we were doing that, we were experiencing it as well. And I think part of what really helped us in our relationship was coming together. Advice?
Ooh, I do. Yeah, along with that, so along with what you said. So when going through the hard parts, if emotions come up for a reason. They're not meant to be ignored or avoided, or I'm just going to turn on the TV and zone out for a little bit. While that feels good sometimes, totally get it. The emotions are there because they need to be addressed, and whatever that means, be it you sit and you cry for a little bit and then wipe your tears and say, I'm okay, I'm going to keep going, or whatever it is, allow yourself to process it. There's a reason that you get to experience it. There's a reason that you're going through that, and it's beautiful. And if a person can step back and try to find that objective beauty in it, it's much easier to go through and to honor for the process it is.
I feel like you just reframed it in a really, I think, positive way of that you get to re-experience it, not that you're being forced to re-experience it. And I think most people are coming into the situation feeling like they're forced, or feeling like they have something really important to say and something really powerful to say. And yet they know if they're going to do it, they have to relive all of the baggage and bullshit that came with it. But you're saying that you get, like, it's a privilege is kind of how you're framing it.
Yeah, I feel like in some ways it is. And whatever that may be for a person, maybe it's so that they can further understand it, to be able to share it with someone else, to better impact someone else's life. Maybe it's because they themselves need to further process it, to accept it a bit more. And whatever it is, there's some reason and there's some value. We get so trapped in the like muddy and sad emotions and forget to take a step back and realize, oh yeah, there's actually a good component to this.
Yeah, you survived it. You're on the other side of it.
Right. Yes.
And I think for us, when it came back up, it helped us kind of put it to rest for forever, essentially, because we went through so much and it was so difficult. And I think we both held on to different pieces without wanting to or meaning to. It was just a part of what happened within our relationship. And I think through the writing, we were able to kind of make peace with our parts that we were still holding on to.
So Nancy Sheet is saying you're all making the bad parts not seem so bad, which
they're bad,
she loves the reframe. So what I would like to know from you is, this is what you do. Like you're psychologist. You have a practice. You do this together. You have some kind of crazy cosmic connection that not everyone, I think, gets to experience. So what advice might you say for somebody who is so not, the word that keeps coming to my mind is evolved, and that's not the word I mean, but on like the spiritual path, right? So somebody who maybe they haven't stepped out onto their spiritual path yet, or their path of healing, whatever kind of framework they're looking at that within. Is there any tactical step that they might be able to do that might make this process a little less daunting? Because I feel like you're coming from such a place of purity, but I think a lot of people might not be there yet, and they might not even know where the path is, let alone be actually walking on it, even just a couple steps.
Yes, tactical steps totally have them. You want me to go with that?
Yes.
Okay, so number one, identify what the problem is. If you're upset, you have to really sit and say, what am I actually upset about? Like, you've got to ask yourself the question, because emotions and problems become these big monsters when really it was like one tiny thing, and it just blew up because everything combined together. So ask yourself what is actually going on, and then make a choice about how you actually want to resolve it. And if that means you're overwhelmed with the writing component, if that means you have all these thoughts floating through your head and you can't organize them, whatever it is, identify it and say, this is how I'm going to tackle it. And particularly working with your team, Jenn, it was like astounding. So rely on the support team that you have. Like with your publishing company, all of you are insanely supportive. So if you don't, awesome. So if you don't have a support team at home, that's okay. You guys make an amazing group. So rely on the support and let yourself talk through it and work through it and allow yourself that space. But you do have to identify what's going on. I feel like nowadays people get overwhelmed and don't actually identify the problem. And then they don't make a choice to do something about it, to do something different.
I think with identifying the problem too is understanding that it's not necessarily about external circumstances. So if you're getting ready to go to work in the morning and you spill your coffee somewhere on something, yourself, the counter, whatever, and you have a mental breakdown, it's not about the coffee at this point. It's saying, okay, you have to stop and look at something that's not the coffee.
I feel like this is really solid, like tactical advice that I think some really good, that people who are really thinking about this can take away, of just kind of assessing things and figuring out like the why, like why is this problem coming up for you? So do you, I was actually talking to somebody this morning who's about to work on their memoir, and I was saying, you know, what I would do potentially is, because sometimes you're writing about really heavy stuff, that maybe, and my advice to him was, and I'm curious because you're actually professionals in the space to see if this is good advice or not, and then I'll have him watch this video. But I said, like, if you're writing about the really hard parts, then maybe what you should consider is doing it before you have a therapy session that's coming up, because he was talking about already seeing a therapist. And I was like, well, I think if when I start mine, I think that sounds like a great idea. Like, I can just schedule my block of writing before I go see my therapist. And then if anything came up, you have that person to process with. Does that sound like sage advice, or is that me just?
Amazing advice.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Amazing.
I feel like, that could be a whole product offering for people. It just seemed like it seems like a really logical thing to do, to have somebody to process it with. Because I think something that you kind of picked up on a little bit is that sometimes people don't have support at home. And I think that's a big, big thing. And I know that for our team, that's one of the reasons why I think we are as supportive as we are, is because we know people's individual circumstances, especially when you're writing about something that is not mainstream, or if you're writing about something from a place of not being healed yet, and you're just pissy and mad at the people around you, but you know you have to tell your story, you're not going to have that support system that you really truly need. So are there other ways that you think that people might be able to find solid support other than seeing an actual, maybe their therapist, or seeking out a therapist, working with a team of people like us? Do you have other, thought processes on just having a good supportive network around you for the whole process, not just like the negative parts? I don't want to focus just on like the bad stuff. That's not fun.
Sharing with other people, I think I shared with friends and family, and so did Anna, about where we were in the process, or what we were up to, or what we were doing. And that made it interesting, and people were interested. Oh, you're writing a book, that's so cool. So keeping the interest for yourself as well by sharing with other people.
I like that a lot. Anna, anything?
Yes, coming from a place where I sometimes am hesitant to share with other people, particularly when I'm like in process with something. I'm like, but I don't have all the details and the things to tell somebody. So even in those times, for people that are like that or can relate to that, just saying anything to someone else is helpful. So even if you're like, I don't even know what's happening, I lost track of where I was in my writing, I'm just completely lost. That's fine. There are people that will get it, like surprisingly get it. Maybe even people that you didn't think would understand. So just having that courage to at least say something is good.
I like that. I like that a lot. So let's talk more outside of the writing process. So that, for the most part, for the two of you seemed like very kind of seamless, at least in our, like, you came to us and you had it, you were like, this is it. Like, we are ready to roll, which does not always happen. So can we talk a little bit about the editing process? And then I want to talk about one of your favorite words about which we refer to as lighting fire, which we'll explain to the folks in a few minutes. But tell a little bit more about just kind of what the editing process was like for you, because I think that's one of those big mysterious things that people don't quite understand.
We love Heather.
Oh my gosh, yes. Heather, the editor, is brilliant.
Was amazing. And I think initially when we looked at the first round of edits, we were like, and then it was just too much, and it was overwhelming. And then I think we stepped away from it. Okay, this is way too much. And we took a break and did something, probably like go have lunch and talk about how many edits there were. and then we went back to it, and it was just brilliant. It was brilliant. And it just elevated everything that we had done. And with that, we were able to accept, like, okay, this needs the work to get to where we wanted it to get to.
On that note,
yes,
it was brutal.
It was hard.
They say it's brutal, and then you're like, no, I got this. Like, I can
It'll
handle
be
that.
fine.
Like, went through a dissertation, everything's fine. And then you're like, oh, wow, they were like, we're not kidding. But it was good. Like, all the edits were amazing. I think the piece for me in the beginning of the editing process that was helpful is that I just said, I'm in this for a reason. I'm going to put aside all of the, oh my gosh, this is like so much work, I'm having a hard time conceptualizing it. And I just plowed in, and we both did. And I was whatever, we're just going to have to do it. So here we go. And then it actually ended up being fun.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And watching it transform. So I think again, for Nancy over there, finding the positive aspects is helpful.
And it was nice to hit the delete button. Oh, this whole page and a half, delete.
Yeah, she likes to delete things. So we went through a few rounds of editing. The second time was not nearly as bad as the first, and the third, it was like, how many did we go through? 3?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
It gets easier. Like the more you do, the easier it gets.
The first round was extra. It was a lot.
And so your advice is to look at it, get overwhelmed, and then walk away, have a cup of coffee, have lunch, and then come back fresh.
Yes. Just take that first hit and go, wow. And then, give yourself an initial break and then just plow in. I mean, it's not going to get done unless you just buckle down and do it.
And you said a good word, which is elevate, right? So it's all about elevating the book. It's not ripping things apart for the sake of ripping them apart. It's to make it stronger and better and more in alignment with your readers. So at least there's a reward for the pain that goes into it.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because I know that I personally make sure that we set expectations super clear, that the editing process is not fun. And the fact that you use the word brutal and then you were like, yeah, you're right. Like that makes, I'm at least happy that you heard that it was going to be a bad, like not a great process. And then you were like, oh, I got this, like we're good. And then you're like, nope, they were right. So I feel like, but you found ways and strategies to kind of get around it and through it, which I think is really powerful, because I do think that the editing process is just, it's a stressful part because it's the first time someone else is touching your baby. And in some instances, they might be telling you that your baby is ugly in certain areas, or maybe your baby has a bad haircut. I don't really know. And I don't think that was the case with you guys, but like, I'm just saying kind of more in theory. And I know that when I was writing one of my books that Heather edited, she asked me for the most simple thing. She just wanted me to conclude a paragraph. That's all she asked. It was chapter 2. It was like one very simple conclusion, and I could not do it. Like I was so overwhelmed. She also deleted an entire chapter on me, but that's a story for another day. It didn't belong, and it made sense, but like that one request felt like completely insurmountable to me. So I did what you guys did, where I'm like, I need to walk away. And I think it took me like 2 weeks before I actually was like, okay, here it is. And when I looked at it, I'm like, I literally added like a sentence. Like that's all I had to do. And it seemed like I needed to write a whole other book. But like I think that's the emotional turmoil that we get in around the editing process, because someone else is now involved with your baby.
Yeah.
Turmoil is a chapter in our book.
It is. What do you recall what chapter off the top of your head? I have my reference. Let's see.
4. I think it's 4.
Let's see. Pop quiz. You also didn't know how long. If it was 6 years or 8 years. So let's see. 4. It's 4.
Can't keep track of how many years.
So let's talk about the now. So your book came out. It is today, as we're recording this, is September 21st. Your book came out technically on the 5th. I believe it was. So what has happened between now and I guess then and now? And one thing I want to really in particular kind of go into is, I don't have a term for it, but kind of like the post-launch blues. I would love if you'd be open to discussing that a little bit, because I feel like I can ask you guys that. And then also kind of like the exciting things that have been, like, what are the unexpected things that have been happening as a result of your book being out there, considering you're not doing some crazy multi-million-dollar book launch type of campaign. You're like really giving it into the hands of the universe, sending out really amazing emails, really being active on social media. Your emails are awesome. I think everyone should be on your mailing list. But like, talk a little bit about the blues, and then let's talk about the exciting stuff.
Okay. So the book went out, and then it was almost like experiencing radio silence, and you're expecting something like crazy cool to happen,
like a parade,
right? Randomly runs down the street, and like you don't realize that you're thinking that's gonna happen, and then it gets launched, and you're like, and then Like that's happening in your head and there's like no reality to that. Like
there's no marching band coming down your street.
no. So that was kind of an odd experience, I have to say. The blues first. I have a tendency to go into the positive side.
I want to end on all the good positive stuff. So, but I know, we know that you hit the blues. So I just want to talk about it a little.
There's no parade.
No, there's no parade. And I think I had a moment of like separation with it. Like, oh, okay, so now it's over. We're done.
That's funny because there are two of us. So she experienced that and I was like, no, we still have to do things. Like send out emails and post it. And she's like, I think it's done.
So like we wrote it and it's in print now. And we don't have to work on it anymore. So I think that was a moment and it happened before it was a physical reality. Where I don't even know, 2 weeks before it came out, 3 weeks before it came out, I was like, oh, okay, so it's over.
But is it really over? Which kind of leads us into the exciting parts. Is it really over or has it just begun?
It's not over. It's like a new phase of life.
Mm-hmm.
It's like every ending brings a beginning, right? So it's the beginning of something else. With the book, it's been fascinating to watch what's happened to it. So we've had a lot of people post on Amazon their reviews of it, and I have just felt like completely honored and blown away by the things that people are writing. Even if it was, I don't even know how many there are now, like 10. Even if we just impacted those 10 people, that's awesome. I'm good. Like that's an accomplishment because they obviously did something in their lives. You can hear it in what they write.
The reviews were awesome.
Yeah, there was 11 as of this morning when I was looking, and they're all like paragraphs and deep. It's not like this book's great, yay. They're like really deep, which I think speaks to the fact that you've accomplished your goal and what you set out to do.
Yeah.
So I know that you have an aversion to the word marketing. So we're going to call it lighting fire, as we've been internally. How are you lighting fire with this? And because Teresa, I totally see your point and agree with you that it feels like it's done because the hard work is done. Like the birthing, like you have birthed a baby and now this book is a toddler and it needs attention and it needs you to bring it places and it needs to learn and, see new sights. So what, do you have plans for what you guys are going to do with the book? Are you doing any events around it? What are your thoughts and plans? So that way if somebody's watching this and they're like, oh my God, I have to get this book and they want to follow you and like keep up to date with what the baby's up to, how would they, what does that look like?
Okay, so someone wants to stay up to date, they can go on our website. So our website is being-centered.com and they can sign up for our email list and we'll send updates. Right now we don't have a book event planned. We are in a transition time period, which is fun and exciting, and we will be awesome. It has been. We will be moving into New York City in the next couple of weeks. So because of that transition period in our lives, we are waiting to hold a book launch event until we get settled and in our new place.
Yeah.
Yeah, did that answer the question?
I mean, we will have something at some point to.
And in the meantime, people can read the book, so they can go to Amazon, and it's in paperback and ebook currently. At some point in the near future, it will also be in hardcover. So we are slowly rolling all things out. But do you have any, last things that you want to share? Anything exciting? Any unexpected, super exciting things that have happened as a result of this You know, like you get to claim that you're now authors and get to put author as part of your bios, in addition to PhD, licensed clinical psychologist, you know, all the important things in life. You know, like, is there any words of wisdom, any parting thoughts you might have?
Yes. Like stare at each other. Life is a journey and it doesn't stop. There's something to welcoming change and adventures. Oftentimes when we try to stop them and stop the natural process, we end up being dragged anyways. It just makes it more miserable. And the world has a natural timing and rhythm to it. So even when something doesn't happen timing-wise quite as you thought, the timing will come. It always does.
What she said.
I knew you were going to say that. Well, that's such a beautiful way to end this conversation. I feel like this conversation was really awesome because I feel like we were able to go much deeper into kind of the mental health side of how this all kind of plays out. And your book is already impacting people. Like you said, at least 11 people who wrote the reviews on Amazon are already inspired by it. So I think that there's nothing but excitement to come on your book. And perhaps we can have you come back to our Facebook and YouTube channel in a couple months, or maybe when you have your, whatever it is that you're doing for a launch, or however that plays out, you know, come back before then, and then we can help promote it a little bit.
Oh, yay.
Thank you so much for being on this journey with us, for taking us through it, for having everything lined up for us. And thank you for having us on Facebook Live and podcast. I don't know all the technical terms, but thank you.
You don't need to. Yes, you are very welcome. And we should thank Beth Lees for connecting.
Oh, yes.
So hi, Beth. Hopefully she's watching. I'll have to tag her in this.
Yes.
She's awesome.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Jenn.
And we had no animals interrupt. What a like an amazing treat. We thought for sure the animals were going to come in. All right. Well, thank you both so much. Facebook, this will all be on YouTube shortly. You can catch the entire interview there. You can follow Teresa and Anna at being-centered.com. You can go to Amazon, type in Awaken Love, or you can go to our website, which is publisherpurposepress.com, and you can get information about the book there as well. Thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.